Hi everyone, it's Donna here from Succeed with Dyslexia with another great guest. And today we are talking all around the parents' experience regarding dyslexia with their own children, of course. And I've got a great guest with me today. It's Liz Loly. Hi, Liz.
Hi, Donna.
Hi. Liz, I'm just going to introduce you and then we'll get chatting, if that's okay, about your journey as a parent of a child with dyslexia. So I know that you're an education and communication consultant, and also at the moment you're doing a postgraduate master's degree in psychology as well as being a busy mum. So I'm sure your professional skills, Liz, may come into play as we chat as well, because I think some of those, your wisdom and so on, may have guided you through the journey with, and I know it's your son who has dyslexia. So, Liz, thank you so much for agreeing to share your story. We do this because we hope that other parents listening to this conversation, it will help and inspire them. So, with that in mind, could you share your story around dyslexia with, I know it's your son?
Absolutely, yeah. So my son, from an early age, he seemed to have certain challenges that didn't match with his overall intelligence. So he seemed very on the ball, very bright, but speech was difficult. By the time he was 2, he could only say about 20 words, and the kind of standard amount was much higher than that. Partly he's got a very chatty mum and a very chatty older sister, and I think partly we spoke for him. He did start speaking later on, but always had issues with word retrieval. And even now, to an extent, we still on a weekly basis now, I would say, okay, explain a bit more what you're trying to say. Tell me about it. And then we get there with what word he's looking for. So from quite young, I sort of knew there was something, some kind of block, I used to describe it as. Then he started school. Actually, in reception, he was fantastic. He's always been very sociable, so he loved being with other children. He seemed to do very well on all the early year foundation stage assessments, because the majority of that was more verbal rather than written, and not so much on actual reading. And then as he went into year 1, he was sort of placed in groups, sort of like he was quite a high child for things like reading and writing. That didn't match when he actually had to read and write himself. So I think it was probably in year 1 that I thought, I'm pretty sure everything going on here is matches with dyslexia, or dyslexia type challenges. And then his confidence started getting really knocked. And that's the thing that for me, I had to do more then. And he had a lovely year 1 teacher who was actually a friend of mine as well. And I think sometimes that makes it harder, because the teacher wanted to do everything for him, but didn't quite know exactly what he needed, and thought, well, this boy's come up with these sort of high assessments. He's a bright child, but he's not able to write anything. And things like when they would sit down and write, he would rub it all out. And he hadn't written much anyway. He'd maybe written 4 lines when other children had written 10, 20. And then he'd rub it all out. And the teacher would say, oh, are you okay, Josh? What's happened? He said, well, I've got no idea what I wrote. I can't read it, so you're not going to be able to. And he was aware that it wasn't what he wanted it to be. He had these ideas, but he couldn't get them down. So at that stage, I think that's when I started putting myself through more dyslexia training. I'd always been interested in the topic of dyslexia. At university, I trained as a primary teacher, specialising in PE, and I did a lot of work around dyspraxia because I was really fascinated by that. And then in my first teaching job, I taught an amazing, incredible little boy who I just thought was so strong and didn't let his dyslexia affect him at all. And then the first parents' evening we had, I was there as this young, fresh 22-year-old teacher, and all bubbly with his parents, and it's amazing because he never lets his dyslexia affect him, and he's so confident and excels in other areas. And they looked at me and said he cries most days because he thinks he's stupid. And I almost cried there and then on the spot. And at that point thought, okay, I need to learn more about dyslexia. I need to somehow help him and then other children to understand that being dyslexic definitely does not mean you're stupid, and him to see his other areas of strength. So then when it started happening with my own son, I already had that background, and I put myself through training that was useful as a teacher and as a parent. And I focused a lot myself on my journey with my son on the emotional side and supporting his emotional needs, and really, really emphasizing all the things that he was amazing at, rather than constant like, oh, well, you can't do this, let's do more of it. You can't read, you can't write, we'll do more and more and more, and you'll spend hours at home doing it. And especially being a teacher myself, I could have done all sorts of extra work at home. But when he came home, he was exhausted. He has always been incredible. And I mean, he's 15 now, about to take GCSEs next year. We've just had a parents' evening, and over again, the comments are how hard he tries at school and how focused he is. So when he came home, I don't think it would have helped him for me to say, right, let's do more of this, that and the other. So we were very careful in what we worked on with him. One of the things I did implement was doing touch, type, read and spell as a programme that I'd heard about at that point through a dyslexia group online. It was mentioned, and I thought, oh, this sounds interesting. It'd be really useful when he starts secondary school for him to be able to touch type. I was actually quite sceptical about the read and spell and thought, yeah, that's not really going to help with that, but it's fine. It will be good. His dad is most probably dyslexic as well, never been diagnosed. He has an older brother who was more severely dyslexic, so it wasn't noticed as much in him, but it's very much in the family. And for his dad, it really helped him through school and then through work, being able to touch type. So we got him on this programme, and I literally could not believe it. He only did about 20-30 minutes a week, because again, I wasn't going to make him do loads and be exhausted and stop him from doing football and all the things he loved doing when he wasn't at school. So it took a few years to go through it, and it was just incredible, the difference to his reading and writing, as well as having the skill to touch type and his confidence. So he started secondary school, having that skill of touch typing. Fast forward another few years, he is using a laptop for all assessments, and that's a massive bonus for him. So yeah, the journey was kind of gradual but constant, reevaluating what was happening, thinking about his self-esteem and how the best way to support him. And my big thing, I suppose, and will always be, is for children, it's that fitting into the education system. And most recently, I've had to have a slight change of view, I suppose. So since he was 4, I've been determined I'm not going to change him to fit in with an education system that isn't designed for people with dyslexia and other neurodiversities. As he's about to do GCSEs, I'm suddenly realising there's got to be an element of fitting in. Because I think it will affect his self-esteem more if he doesn't come out with grades that he feels proud of. So again, it's that whole weighing it up. And certain subjects, I'm saying, look, you're doing really well at that. Yes, we could spend hours and hours and you could get an absolutely amazing grade. But actually, I don't want you to give up your life. So let's focus on the things that need a bit more of a push, because they really, really are tricky for you. Keep going with the things you're doing well at and be proud of that. And it's all about constantly getting that balance. And so far, and feedback from school and everything else, it seems to be working.
Brilliant, Liz. That's such a story of hope, I think, for parents who might be in a place where you were, a few years ago when your son was younger. It sounds to me then that you've been really wise as a parent, because you've been reactive as well as having an idea of where you've wanted to take him as he's got older. But I love what you said about it's almost the self-esteem issue, and then it was giving him some of the tools like the keyboard skills and so on, and now it's changing your philosophy slightly again, like you say, because of the chapter he's in education. Yeah, maybe for a little while he's got to try and fit in and so on, so that he can navigate through exams. How much of that wisdom was because you were a teacher older as well? Or how much of it is just because you're a very wise person, Liz?
Oh, I don't know about that. Yeah, I think.
Where did it come from? Was it when you started getting educated about dyslexia, or just was it innate as a mum? Or
I think certain things were innate as a mum, but maybe I had more confidence to go with my own gut feelings because of having the teaching qualification and being involved with children so much. Even as a teacher, self-esteem and the pastoral side of it has always been the most important thing to me. So definitely it helped. But yeah, I think it gave me the confidence to then follow what I felt was right, and that the key focus was on his self-esteem. And by increasing his self-esteem, he would be able to achieve more. And just recently, he has had assessments at school to confirm getting extra time and using a laptop and things like that for GCSEs. And I actually momentarily had a little panic because he's never had a formal dyslexia assessment.
well, I was wondering where your journey with assessment had been. So he's not been formally identified in that way.
No, he's not been formally identified. When he was at primary school and I raised concerns, they did a dyslexia screener with him. I'll come back to that if that's okay.
Yes, please do.
That's quite an interesting sort of area as well and ties in with my knowledge. But as we've gone through, I've been more and more convinced that this is what it is. I ummed and ahed about getting a private assessment. It wasn't possible to get an assessment through school when he was younger. Because I worked for the local authority, when I did try and find out if they could recommend someone privately when we were really early on in the journey and I didn't know so many people within the dyslexia world, they sent someone from the authority to the school, an educational psychologist. It wasn't a full assessment. Some parts of it were helpful. Some parts of it were a little bit worrying in that the educational psychologist was absolutely stunned and shocked by how spiky his profile was and how he was really amazing at some things and not at other things. And I had this amazing conversation with her where she was really enthusiastic. And then afterwards I thought, but hang on, that's just a typical dyslexic profile. So why are we so surprised? So we carried on and we benefited that his secondary school are absolutely amazing, really on the ball with everything to do with dyslexia. So right from the beginning, on my recommendation, they've given him extra time for exams and based on processing speed that's come up on screeners. They've given him coloured paper. They've really, really taken on board everything that he feels is useful and everything that I have learned along the way. But it still came to this point where I thought he's year 10. They had an expert carrying out these assessments. And I thought, what if they turn around and say, well, I don't know what you're on about. Actually, there's no processing difficulty. There's no this, there's no that. And he's fine. And in some ways, he's built up a lot of strategies to overcome some of the challenges. So I actually went through a bit of time where I doubted myself and thought, well, what do I do then if I've got it wrong or if it looks like he's not actually dyslexic? And the lady who carried out the assessments did it, confirmed with him that he would be getting the extra time, that everything showed up as we expected, and also gave me that reassurance actually as a professional that you're spot on, everything you've said along the way, the things I'd raised to educational psychologists years ago, yeah, it all matches. So a lot of it is that gut instinct, and so I had that benefit of having professional knowledge along with the mother's gut instinct, and that definitely helped the two things together.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we really like to reinforce the idea that trusting your parental instincts is the way to go here. And I think your message is one of hope, Liz, because I think a lot of parents, when they suspect around dyslexia, think that they must run out and get an assessment in some way. Otherwise, they can't help their child or school won't be able to support. So that's really, I think, really positive what you say, that your son hasn't gone through that process, or he's gone through it a little bit every step of the way, but still got the help that he's needed. And I think, therefore, then, just out of interest, and I don't know if this is too personal for you to answer, and please don't if it is, Do you use the label dyslexia when you talk to your son? Have you done it way back when, or have you not spoke about that and just talked in different ways around dyslexia with him?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important. Now, because we didn't have the definite diagnosis, I've always been quite careful rather than saying you are dyslexic. I always used to say that it's quite likely that you are dyslexic, and that's why some things are more difficult than you expect them to be. But it's also why when we as a family are discussing things and you come up with a solution that is totally different to everyone else and is amazing, that's also part of it because of your different way of thinking. And I was very conscious that I didn't want him to use dyslexia as an excuse, but I also didn't want him to have this idea that he was stupid because he didn't think the way he was expected to think. And he is actually, he makes me so proud when he talks about dyslexia. He's a very humorous boy. And he will jokingly use it as an excuse when he's playing Xbox with his friends. And I can hear him saying, oh, well, remember, I'm dyslexic. And often it's got absolutely nothing to do with dyslexia. He's just died in some game or whatever it is. He'll be quite funny about it.
Yes.
I've never known him use it as an actual excuse, like, oh, well, I can't do that at school because of this. He's actually very grounded, more so than I will probably ever be. And I remember him saying to me once that dyslexia has taught me that I know where my strengths are, and I'm not going to have strengths in everything. So I'm not going to aim to be at the top of the class for English, and that's okay. And I almost went into sort of powerful mum, like, oh, well, you can always, improve and you're amazing. And I thought, no, he's absolutely right. Why fight against this? Oh, I should be doing better. I should be doing better in something that isn't going to be his dream skill, and something that, in all honesty, he's not that interested in. So be realistic. And he does seem to really recognise his strengths, and isn't kind of ashamed of his weaknesses and challenges. Takes them on the head and does what he needs to do, but without thinking, oh no, I'm useless at this, that, and the other, which is amazing to see.
It is amazing because that's a real high level of emotional intelligence, isn't it? And we talk a lot about this in education, metacognition, understanding yourself as a learner and your skills. And I think I love what you say because it is sometimes being good enough in some subjects to get through, isn't it? Rather than thinking everything, you've got to ace everything. Do you think that emphasis that you've obviously given us a great mum around the self-esteem that you mentioned was a passion of yours, right from the beginning with him. How much of that do you think has enabled him to talk in these ways and be very wise about who he is and okay with not being great at this, but being really proud that he's fantastic at that instead?
Yeah, I think it's helped loads. And I think just creating that atmosphere and that environment that dyslexia is amazing. Yes, it can be very frustrating and cause issues when you're trying to fit into a system. And yeah, absolutely, any frustrations are valid, but actually it's incredible to think like he does. And his empathy is amazing. And I think that all comes into the dyslexia as well. So I think having that positive feeling about it all has rubbed off on him. I've often, as a professional, had either parents who I know as other parents of, like, friends of my children, or people who have come to me just as a professional, and at times have been absolutely devastated that a teacher has said their child may be dyslexic. And it's actually taken me by surprise because I'm just like, well, what do you mean? Why is that so awful? Like, it's great. It means they think in a different way. They can do this, they can do that. It explains why they've been finding something or other difficult. And there are things we can do now. And I sort of go off on this whole reel. And I think sometimes they look at me like I'm mad. And I'm thinking, I don't get it. And over the years, I've sort of understand a bit more why people have that feeling, because they don't understand it and they think it's this awful thing, rather than actually it's just a different way of thinking. And yes, we all have things that we're good at and not so good at. But if you know the reasons and you know it's because of processing speed or word retrieval or what it is, you can actually address those difficulties and work on them and enhance your own strengths. So yeah, I think that has been key.
Yeah, and your attitude, it shines through, because I think listening to you talk in this way will really help other parents who, like you say, aren't there yet and still see this as an endless, negative, horrible situation that they may find themselves in. And of course, as we know as parents, our attitudes and the emotions that we give out, impact on our children, don't they? So for parents listening to this, Liz, and thank you so much for sharing this story. This is why we wanted to do it, because we want to really, educate other parents who might be struggling a bit. What advice then would you give to a parent who's just at the beginning of that journey, or feel a bit lost? So they're on the way somewhere, but don't know where that place is, and are horribly, stressed out and confused and so on.
Yeah, it's something that often I do speak to parents in that partly because friends of mine say, oh, I've got this friend and they're worried because they think their child might be dyslexic, or dyslexia has been mentioned. Would you mind having a chat? I'm like, absolutely. I love to think that I can try and help people who are in that position of thinking that it's something really awful, and then being able to show them, there is hope and it's not an awful thing. One of my key bits of advice, and I have to be 100% honest here and say, I know I didn't always get this right, that communication with school is so important. And at secondary school, I believe I have got that right. And I'm lucky that my son's school have been willing to communicate with me and understand the importance. At primary school, although I had a very good relationship with many people at his primary school, I taught at his primary school part-time. As a parent, I let my frustrations sometimes I'd say it wasn't a bad thing because it drove things forward. It got him some of the support he needed and slightly changed the ways of thinking. But at times, I just got too frustrated and couldn't deal with it. And there was even a meeting where I just had to walk out and leave his dad to kind of carry on, because I thought, I can't deal with this, because it was so emotional to me. And I think that's one big bit of advice for parents. Try and communicate with the school positively. Accept that you are going to be emotional. It's a very emotional thing. And that's okay. You're allowed to. But remember, the school isn't against you. They are trying to help as well. Sometimes they don't have the knowledge that we would like them to have. Their time is limited. They've got so many other things to do. But don't go to meetings with school expecting a battle. But do expect emotions to come about, and that's okay. But I think if you can get that communication with the school and work together on a child's strengths, and so much of what you know about your child from home will be useful for the school to know. So for my son, anything to do with numbers was brilliant. He always loved numbers. I remember there was one Mother's Day where a couple of weeks after, I think it was, he had no idea what they'd bought me for Mother's Day, but he knew exactly how much it cost, because numbers just stick. Things, the fact it was perfume, no idea. So I was able to say to the school, look, at home, I number instructions for him, because then he knows how many things he's got to do. And he will remember, like, okay, 1, 2, 3, there's another one there. And then he'll be able to do it. Whereas if you just gave him 4 things to do, especially at that age, if he remembered the first one, it would be amazing. So it's the knowledge you have at home and their interests from home. I've recently worked with a boy who has a dyslexia diagnosis, who's 7, absolutely loves Lego. And his mum told me that. So I was like, great, we're bringing that into what we're doing. Can you take some photos of him playing with Lego at home? Send them to me. And then he talked about what he was doing, and then he constructed these amazing sentences, and he was so into it. Whereas if I'd have just said, right, I'm going to get you to do some writing, and I'd chosen a subject that I'm interested in that he had no interest in, is so different. And it was always the same with Josh. I mean, a lot of his initial reading skills came about thanks to football and match attacks cards. And it always used to amaze me that he could read these really complicated looking foreign names on match attacks cards because it was to do with football, and he loved football, so it just stuck. And then other things, it was like, well, no, I don't want to read a book. But from that, he then developed the skill of reading alongside other things. So use their interests, talk to school, know that it's not all a negative thing. There are so many benefits, but yeah, it's that acceptance as well. Acceptance that you will get frustrated, acceptance that your child has got a frustrating journey because the education system isn't set up for children with dyslexia. So there will be some challenges along the way, but if you can help them along the way and help them to become more independent as they're going through school, they're going to be so resilient and ready to excel in the real world. They'll fly. And that, that's the bit that's so exciting and that please hang on to.
Yeah, no, it's so wise, Liz. And I'm wondering then, on the back of that brilliant advice, this might be a strange question, but how much of being a mum of Josh has impacted on you as a teacher and education professional? Have you learnt from your mum's side? Has your mum's side taught you teacher side? I know we started saying because you were a teacher, it enabled some of that journey. Flipping it round, have you learnt so much from being a mum? I can see you nodding and smiling.
Yeah.
It made you a better teacher now.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. And because partly I've had to learn that I don't have all the knowledge. He has the knowledge about himself. Yes, he may need helping to guide through and get out the positives and what's happening. But actually, every single child, the knowledge about them is within them. And yes, it was easier in a way for me to find out more about Josh because he's my son and I spend so much time with him. But actually now I can see that with children that I work with as well, because you think, okay, yeah, let's take it at that level and take it with where they need to be at. And the whole thing of the self-esteem and everything has become even more important to me over the years, because when a child feels more empowered, they obviously achieve more. And if they feel they're rubbish, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. So yeah, oh my life, it's helped me so much.
Yeah,
And
it's brilliant because it's a two-way journey, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the whole family as well, I guess.
Yeah, totally. And it's lovely actually to hear my daughter, who's 2 years older than my son, really understand how things like exams are very different for the two of them. So they both did we live in an area with a grammar school. So just before they were 11, they had to take exams to see if they could go to a grammar school, which can be quite a demoralizing thing to do at that age. And they both are going through the grammar school now. But my son knows he won't achieve the same grades as my daughter. But what is lovely is that my daughter knows that's not because he's not as intelligent. And he will sometimes say, oh, well, I'm not going to get those kind of grades. And he might sometimes slip into because I'm not as clever or I'm not that. Me and my daughter will both jump in straight away with, that's not the reason. Exams aren't the way that highlight your intelligence in the best way. That does not mean that you're not as, I think sometimes he does it just for the effect of us two both going, no, that's not what it's about. But it's lovely to see that she fully understands that. And also she can now see it in her friends. And he has always been very understanding and empathetic to other people with different needs, not necessarily dyslexia, but all sorts of, he's always worked really well with children who are autistic or have got other learning needs without needing to be told they're different in any way. He's got that natural understanding that we are all different and that's a lovely thing. Yeah.
That's so lovely to hear, Liz. And, it's a credit to your skills as a mum as well. I know it is. I think I know the answer to this because, my goodness, you are a glowing ball of positivity. But I'm going to ask it nevertheless. Do you feel optimistic for the future around dyslexia? Not necessarily just for your son. I mean, he sounds amazing. But for where we're heading in our education system and so on, are we going to a better place, do you think?
I do. I have times when I'm frustrated and when I think, why aren't we moving quicker? And I love being involved with the world of dyslexia for work as well, because I can keep pushing away at things. And I can see that there are others like yourself, like me, like so many other people who are determined to make things better. And that, I guess when I first started my journey with dyslexia with my son, I almost thought that people didn't want to help and didn't want to change things. Whereas I now have this big understanding of it's a huge thing to change our education system. It's been around for years and years and years, and there are lots of good things about it. And how do you go about changing something that's so monumental? But I can see that there are enough of us who do want to change it, and that there are so many amazing teachers who are making changes in their own way. And eventually there's going to be bigger policy changes that will help everyone. And I honestly believe there will be a day when you're not judged on how much you can write in an exam, but on your personal skills and everything else, and how well you can overcome things rather than just learning things for an exam, shoving it down on a piece of paper. So yeah, I have days when I'm frustrated that things haven't moved quicker, and that when people talk to you and they had the same issues 20, 30, 40 years ago, and it's like that's still happening now. But I'm very optimistic that with all the people who are working on change, it will change. And there's a lot of support out there for people who are going through frustrations to help them through the process.
Yes, no, wise words. And, we totally agree with you here at Succeed with Dyslexia. That's what we do. That's why we do what we do, because we want to raise awareness. We want to have these conversations. So thank you for all that you do, because I know that you are a one-woman revolution happening here. And if folks feel so inspired by you, Liz, can they keep in touch with you? Can they reach out to you? And if so, where's a good place to find you? We can put links on the back of this chat as well. But where's a good place for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just love talking to people on a personal or professional level to kind of keep things positive and to help people. So please do get in touch. It's probably easiest through Twitter. And on Twitter, I am Lizzie Loly. And Lolly is just Loly, just to make it more tricky. Yeah. So please feel free to contact me there. Or if anybody wants my email address or anything like that, I'm more than happy.
We can share that for sure. Yeah, thank you, Liz, because I think a lot of folks will want to reach out to you on the back of this conversation with your professional, expertise, but also as a fellow parent who's just going through a journey, really. So I can't thank you enough, because that conversation was brilliant, and you've covered so much there, from strategies that you did as a parent, reflecting back and looking to the future now as your son goes into our exam system really here in the UK. So thank you so much, and keep being as brilliant as you are, because I know as well how passionate you are in the dyslexic community. You're a great advocate and ally for the community as well. So I just say thank you to you, and I'm going to say thank you to our listeners as well. So thank you so much, everyone. If this conversation has resonated with you, this is why Liz and I wanted to have this chat, because we want to inspire and also for people to know that you're not on your own. So do keep in touch with us. We will put links into the chat box so that you've got information to reach out to Liz and to us here at Succeed with Dyslexia. So thank you, Liz, and thank you everybody for listening, and see you next time.
Thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video as much as we did putting it together. Now we have some more fantastic content for you. Please feel free to click this link here and learn more about Tom Hunt as he discusses some of the ways that we can cater to dyslexic individuals in order to make sure their educational needs are met. If you have any comments or questions, leave them in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching.